For those in the other class, I'll provide the link to this reading of it as well as the text version of the short story. But what are your first reactions to the Masque of the Red Death? Ella? Pretty spooky. What would we categorize spooky as a mood?
I would think it's like a somber mood throughout this whole thing.
Somber, yeah. I'm going to write this whole thing in red marker for obvious reasons. I hope that you guys are okay with that. Spooky, somber, for sure. Any other adjectives that come to mind? Bella? Sorry?
Something hidden, it seems.
Hidden?
Yeah, like we will know things that we don't know until we're going to get into it.
Yeah, hidden. I like that. Mysterious. This story was written 200 years ago. I find it particularly, we do read it, to be clear, every year in this class, but it's never been as appropriate as it is this year in the face of a pandemic. Now, the pandemic that we're facing is not as extreme as the Red Death, fortunately, which is, fictional, obviously. But certainly there are some parallels that we can draw. What do you notice about the structure of this story? What is the plot? I'm gonna use exactly what you said, Bella, because that's almost kind of perfect. The plot is death? Kind of is. What happens in the story? Usually in a story, things happen. There is a party. The Red Death shows up and everybody dies. That is the plot. So, how can that work?
But it was like they were exempt from the Red Death before this masked person came in. It was like they were all having their party and everyone else in the world was dying. So they had their own special little...
Yeah, aren't young people the worst? You walked right into that. And by young people, I don't mean you guys. I mean all those 20-year-olds in Winnipeg that are allegedly spreading the coronavirus to everyone. I'm not sure that that's actually true, but that's what the government seems to be saying right now. But certainly there is a party while the country dies.
Then they died too, so I just don't understand why.
Well, that's a question worth asking. Why don't they? Yeah.
Well, I was also going to say it's very, well, for the party while the country dies, like everyone's very selfish, and you can see that even when the Red Death arrives, that
Yeah.
no one moves to stop him or it from spreading.
Right.
It, even though, because that would mean getting it themselves. So no one stopped him until he was able to spread it to everyone.
Yes. Yes. So very selfish. Again, fairly obvious parallels to the present day. Zoe?
and how he's like also having all the parties and stuff, it makes him like, you know, be like just spending the money for him and his like only his like 1,000 friends, and be like, oh, we're just like an elite group over here, and like everyone else can die. I guess that's where the party comes in. It's like I can have a party, everyone else is dying, but I'm okay. We can have friends, we can have parties.
Yeah, even his name is sort of indicates his personality, right? Prospero is a name from Shakespeare, by the way. We can, it's not worth investigating all of that, but he's taken the name from Shakespeare. Now, he invites all of his friends to the party and, you know, seals off the castle, the abbey, so that no one else can get in, and they've got all of the supplies that they need, and, you know, those poor peasants out there can, you know, they're on their own. Are there any other characters than Prince Prospero?
Red Death is kind of a character.
Yeah. Prince Prospero and good old RD. That's it. And one of them doesn't even speak. And Prince Prospero says one line, I think. Doesn't he have one quote? So we have a story that has only one spoken sentence in it, one spoken quote. It has no plot, basically has no characters. All we know about Prince Prospero is that he is happy and dauntless and sagacious. How is this story so effective when it doesn't have characters or a plot? Because, yes, we can say that the prince is a character. I mean, he's described to us to some degree, but we never develop any affinity for him. Like, we never learn to see things through his eyes. We're not following his story. So usually in a story, we are supposed to identify with the protagonist. Is he the protagonist? Not really. Is there a protagonist? Bella?
Well, wouldn't it be kind of death, just like in a way, because everyone has that. Nobody wants to just die and be like, oh yeah, like I'm okay with the Red Death just coming over here, like it's all good. Like we're not really. So wouldn't the protagonist kind of be like that? Like we can all relate to not wanting or having the fear of dying, things like especially the pandemic.
Yeah, the protagonist is death or the fear of death. We could read it that way. And so, obviously, by trying to escape and seal off the outside world, we come to the rather obvious conclusion that's been well explored in lots of literature before, that there's no escaping from death for anybody, right? Maybe for a little while you can, but everybody dies. So that's not exactly groundbreaking. It's not exactly news, but there's something that's really effective about this story. In the absence of characters that we can identify with, or plot, or an easily identifiable protagonist even, there's something that's really effective about it. And I think that, to me, this story is almost like an experiment. It's an experiment in how far can I go if I focus only on mood and setting. I'm not organizing my board here. I'm just slapping things up where there is room to slap them up, for the record. So there is mood up the wazoo and setting galore, and that's really all there is. And so he is able to what, in theory, if I said to you, we're going to read a story that is all just setting and mood, there's no characters, there's no plot, it's setting and mood, would you think that there was any chance that that could be any good at all? You would be right to be skeptical, right? Not just anyone can pull that off. So that's kind of what makes it such a masterpiece, because you can't ignore the setting and the mood, because that's all he does for 3.5 pages is set the scene. He's describing it all, and the choices of words that he has, that he uses to describe the plague and the castle and the party, all contribute to the mood.
It's interesting how throughout the short story, because of the small amounts, like to no characters, how certain, I guess, more moods have been given, like in a capital letter, as if they are a character, like at the end, darkness, decay, and the Red Death, and then earlier on there's mention of time. That is so turning those into characters in a way,
yes,
without actually having characters.
Yeah, that's really important, actually. So to reiterate for the microphone, we have characters including capital D, darkness, decay, time. There may even be other ones in there that I am not remembering. Sorry?
There's beauty.
Beauty, yeah. So it's almost like these sort of abstract concepts are our characters. At the end of the story, everyone dies, the clock stops, and the lights go out. So beauty is gone when everyone is dead, and you can't see them anyways because the lights are all out. Time has stopped. It's only darkness, decay, and the Red Death that are left. Boy, that is some dark, dark stuff. And we might even read this as some sort of a metaphor for the universe. Eventually, all the lights are going to go out. There's not going to be anything left except darkness and death. Whew. Happy stuff, hey? We should have read this on Halloween. We didn't have class on Halloween, so, do the best we can. There's not much denying that it's good. I mean, he's clearly gifted with words. And some of the vocabulary in there was no doubt unfamiliar to you, and that's okay. And so my question to you is, did you find that having unfamiliar vocabulary was really a hindrance to you in understanding the story? Not really, no. Because even if you didn't know exactly what that word meant, you hadn't seen it before, it's usually pretty clear in context what it was referring to. And the words themselves are, it's almost as though the sound of them is more important than the meaning. And so the word might not have a clear definition in your mind, but it's still somehow contributing to this mood. And I think that is, that's quite genius. So I will have, actually I can give you some time to do it now. I will have some questions for you about the Masque of the Red Death. I wonder if I should if I should challenge you to come up with ways in which you can connect it to 2020. So if we're in the Masque of the Red Death right now, who's Prince Prospero? Is it Donald Trump? In some ways? Is it whoever your leader is in the country? Yeah. Is it the Prime Minister of New Zealand, I guess, who has closed that country off to everyone? No one is allowed in. Ella?
Like I thought too, with like something like they kind of played with, it was like the red and then like the blue light at the end too, and that kind of made me think of it as well.
Yeah, the blue on one side and red on the other, and all the other colors in between, is a nice equivalency too. Now, Poe sure spends a lot of time on those colors. And the orientations of the rooms from the east to the west. What possible difference could it make what direction they're facing?
There's also 7 rooms.
There's also 7.
And I don't know, one thing that just came to me, there's 7 rooms on Earth, there's 7 continents. So
7 continents. Oh, that's...
I was kind of thinking of the Red Death going from one continent to the other until the whole world is.
Yeah, that's... I actually had never thought of that interpretation before. I think I kind of like it. So certainly we can have the coronavirus moving from one continent to another, and one room. So starting in the east and going to the west, that could kind of work. Yeah. Bella?
Another thing that I was thinking about before as well is that I was thinking of the world thing actually too, and I was thinking that the color might also represent kind of where they think is better and worse. And like, is there something that was terrible going on in the West? If the worst rooms in the West, is there something going on in the West world at that time when he's writing it that was considered to be organ or whatever?
There are. Well, I want to see what else you guys come up with. There's interpretations for that I can kind of answer that question, but I don't want to just yet, if that kind of makes sense. Not that my interpretation is necessarily the right one, but I want to see if you guys can put this together. So there's possibility there, but we can go further with it, I think. Zoe?
Well, like, sort of like going through the colors from the east to the west, it's like, it starts with like blue, so like it's like sort of darker color, and I feel like purple gets a little lighter, so like it might get a little better, like, and then to green, like, it's like roughly, I think it's, I don't know, it's close to the same, maybe a little lighter, and then orange would be lighter than that, and then gets all the way to white, where it's like, you know, it's there, and then it goes like downhill real fast, or it's straight to black, so as it, maybe like it was bad, it's getting better, and like it's getting good, and then it's going to go bad again.
So, yeah, you're getting closer, I think. Like you're getting closer. So, if we think about how important that ebony clock is at the very end, what if we apply that concept of time to the rooms? So then, well, I'll stop there and let you percolate on that a little bit. Zoe?
Well, this is like not on the color side, but like going from east to west, it's like when the sun rises, and then like it sets on the west.
Yeah, the sun rises in the east.
And then
So, which reinforces that time idea. So, we can look at white as noon, right? The sun is right overhead, something like that. But on the larger scale, we could look at it as, and colors have I don't want to say always, but colors very often have symbolic significance. And if the author goes out of his way, as he clearly does here, to talk about these contrasting colors in different places in a particular order, then the colors probably mean something. So we could try to investigate, purple symbolizes royalty, and green symbolizes youth and vitality, and all those sorts of things. Like we could put that together, and people have. Those analyses are out there. But there's the common interpretation of this among the literary critics is that we're talking about a lifespan. So from birth to death. And so we move through the different sort of stages of life, and the death at the end of it being inescapable. And so then it becomes when Prince Prospero rushes from the Blue Room all the way through, he passes through his whole life and gets to the Black Room where it's time to die.
And that's why no one followed him.
What's that?
And that's possibly why no one followed him.
And that's possibly but why no one followed him. Yeah. So do we need to, so that's going into the symbolic aspect of this quite a bit. It's possible to go more into the different sort of symbolic aspects of this story, but I want to say that I don't think that that's necessarily so important. So I have those analyses of what all the different colors can mean, but I think it's enough for us to know that they mean something, and we don't have to analyze it to that extent. I think what is most important about this is the mood and the setting, right? And so when we study this particular short story, we want to look at word choice and pacing and building, and look at how he has constructed that. You can't, and even if it's not Christopher Lee reading it, even if it's just me reading it, or even if you're reading it in your head, you're going to feel that growing sense of dread and unease, and it's Poe's, it's what he does. And it's a really tricky effect to achieve. And I can't think of a better example of anything that I've read that has just been so thoroughly mood setting done so masterfully. So that is, aside from the mask being appropriate to me wearing one right now, and the Red Death being appropriate to us living in a pandemic right now. In a normal year, the reason we would be reading it would be for the mood and the setting. So I will. Let's see. How much time have we got? What is this, over 10-2 or quarter to? 10-2, I think. Okay. Why don't we say? It's difficult to switch gears now, but I think we kind of have to.